Hi guys, and welcome to the first day of History of Western Music. I'm really sorry that I'm not here today. I have to be at a conference in Albuquerque this week. Um, so it's going to be a little bit of a weird start to the class, and we will really get going in earnest next Monday on March 11th. I really apologize. I really didn't have any choice in the matter of needing to be off campus this week. So I ask that you hang in there with me this week, do the couple of assignments that I'll give, and hopefully we'll get you oriented to the class and we'll be ready to really roll next week as well. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with an overview of the course expectations for this course. And if we get through that today, it's typically my first day of class. You can watch this, and this will be your first day of History of Western Music. Let me begin by just saying that what this class is. And this class is, I always like to say that when we finish this class, the goal is if you go to a concert on your college campus, when you move on to the next level and you see that there is a piece being performed by Bach or by Beethoven or Mozart or Haydn or Brahms, that you'll understand some of the values of the time of that composer and what they are what they are operating with in terms of their values in writing a piece of music. And we will focus in this class primarily on the three primary eras of Western classical music, which would be the Baroque era, the Viennese era or the classical era, and then the Romantic era. So there are really three basic things. And then from there, you'll really have a good feel for the background of Western classical music history at that point. So that's what the class is all about. We will do this largely through lectures in class and through listening. And the listening is a big part of this class. I want you to involve yourself in the music, hear the music, and to think and speak thoughtfully about the music. We'll go through this as we get into our course expectations. Okay, let's go on through. You see the course expectations on the screen. As I said, this is History of Western Music. Let me see if I can make that screen a little bit, or that document a little bit bigger. Yeah, I like that. That's even better. Obviously, my name is Scott Laird. I'm thrilled to be working with you. I think most of you know me already, so I'm glad to have you. The class meets 3 times a week. We will meet during G block on Monday, Thursday, and on Friday. And Friday, we will use the lab block. So I do want you to remember that that is the case as well. This first paragraph is really just a basic, broad paragraph about music and why it's important. And I'm glad that you've taken this class. It is your humanities core elective for this term. But also, just it's really great to know something about music and to be articulate about music. The second paragraph, the course is a chronological survey of Western art music focusing primarily on the Baroque, Viennese, and Romantic eras. And if you want just a kind of a feel for the dates, it's roughly from 1600 to 1900. So that's basically what we're looking at. Students will find an emphasis on music and listening as a vehicle to understanding theoretical and historical trends of each stylistic period. Really, we're going to talk about culture a good bit, and we're going to talk about values of the composer, values of the public, as it relates to the music that was being written. Stylistic and composer overviews of the eras serve as conceptual focus for the music that follows in each historical period. One of the terms that I'll use a lot is that we'll sort of put each composer under and their information under an umbrella. When we talk about Beethoven, we'll sort of find all of the things that relate to Beethoven. Or when we talk about Mozart, we'll have all kind of this data that we can know and understand about Mozart and the music that he was writing, so that when you listen to the music, it makes sense to you. And that's really the goal of the class. We do have a text for this class. It is Listen by Joseph Kerman. And I would also say the way I've organized the class and the assessment in the class is that students who are deeply into music will find lots of ways to dive deeper, and students that are new to this subject matter should be able to be very successful in the class as well. And you'll see how I do the assessment soon. In the end, students are encouraged to reflect on the music that you hear and write meaningful reflections on that music based on your perspective. And I think that's really important to note. So, course content includes a lesson on just some basic vocabulary. The first 2 chapters of the book are really background vocabulary chapters so that everybody is up to speed on some common terms that you will definitely need to use. So that will be the first sort of step as we get going. And then you'll note that we go to the early Baroque period and the late Baroque period. Those will all fall under the umbrella of the first kind of unit in the Baroque era. And then we split the Viennese period into early and late. Again, the Viennese era will be another unit. And then finally, the third unit would be Romanticism and Nationalism, and some of the composers that are listed there. The primary materials for this book include the textbook, Listen. It will be sort of a first resource of research on the composers and the pieces that we're listening to, and all of the listening pieces are selected from that book so that you can reference back and forth. So any of the pieces that we find in our listening, you'll be able to find an entry on them in the book, and lots of background on the era that we're dealing with. Okay, so we have the textbook. I do have a Google Classroom page. I'm hoping that everyone is registered for the Google Class at this point. And that will be the primary source for you to turn in assignments and for me to communicate with the class. I will communicate with you as I am right now through the Google Classroom site. I use primarily YouTube recordings because they're free and available to everybody. So we will use YouTube as a huge resource throughout the class. There aren't so many other MP3 recordings. Most of everything I give you is through YouTube. And I also am a big believer in using Wikipedia to get broad overviews of composers, stylistic periods, places, times, that kind of thing. So we will use web content for sure to do what I will refer to as light research on composers and pieces and that kind of stuff. So lots of web content. Like all humanities department classes, this course will be graded on a 90, 80, 70 scale. I do give pluses and minuses in this class, and I think you'll find that that is very comfortable. Our grading breakdown is as follows. There will be each test that we take will be worth 15% of the overall class content. There will be 2 tests initially, a Baroque test during the first half of the term. A Viennese test usually occurs just after midterm, and then there will be a final exam on the Romantic era of music history with some of the Baroque and Viennese concepts kind of included in that. So the 3 tests altogether, including the final exam, are 45% of the course. Class participation and just being willing to talk in class and communicate and discuss will be 10% of your overall grade. And then you're going to notice that there's a very high premium on the homework and the listening responses. And I would just say, do note that there are only 3 class periods a week for this class. So the kind of the expectation is that the other 2 class periods would be a part of that homework and listening time. I do want to just take a minute here to say that I'm also really open to your feedback on homework time, how long it's taking you. I try to be very careful not to assign too much homework for this class, but we have a certain amount that we just need to get through. I am going to ask you to always tell me in writing how long any entry takes you to do in your homework. I'm sort of taking this trimester to do some research and to learn how long things are taking students. I'm very interested that the homework, while it is rigorous, is not overwhelming. And so I do want to I want you to know that I'm very interested in that with you. Let's go right on. Okay, so I have this tab called Listening Labs here. This is kind of a new idea for me. I've always had these listening assignments. In the past, I have called them thoughtful responses. Listening Labs, thoughtful responses, what they really are is a written response to music that you are listening to. So let's just see what I wrote here, and then we'll talk about it a bit. This course will require a great deal of listening to selected excerpts of composers' works. The only way to really understand the music of an era is to listen to it. And so we've got to take the time to do some listening. And this is certainly something that doesn't need to be done in class. You can do this as part of your work outside of class. We're going to call these listening labs, and these labs will accompany the text and are an integral part of the course curriculum. And in fact, this course wouldn't be this course without listening to the music of the composers. I will provide links to audio files in Google Classroom, and then you can access those files anywhere to do this work outside of class. This is part of the homework requirement for the course, and it's in lieu of 2 of the class periods per week. So this should hold a very high place of importance in your planned study time for the course. I would take a minute here to say to you, the students that do a little bit of listening every day are the ones who are the most successful in this class. If you wait until the day before an assignment is due and try to do an hour's worth of listening and respond to it in writing, I don't think it will be very effective, and you probably won't get nearly as much out of the class. I would recommend that for this trimester, that the music for your listening for any given week become part of your personal listening routine. Whether it's active listening while you're writing or passive listening while you're doing other homework, the more that you sort of internalize the music of these various composers, the better you're going to do in this class. So I would recommend that this become part of your personal listening routine for the next 10 weeks or so. For each of these listening assignments that I give, you'll be asked to give a thoughtful written response. And we will also call this a lab report this term. And this lab idea is a new idea this year that I'm working with. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it when we're together, but the lab report or the thoughtful response is what I will be collecting, okay? You'll do this for each listening examples. For every lab report or thoughtful response, I'm asking you to reference the reading that is in the book. That would be some related background information. Any related vocabulary, so once we get this vocabulary learned here at the beginning of the term, use the vocabulary words, and anytime you use a vocabulary word from the text, put it in italics so I understand you're referencing something that you learned as part of the class. And I also encourage you for every piece to do some light research. Now, what I consider to be light research is Googling the name of the composer or maybe the name of the piece and see what you can find in Wikipedia or some very quickly accessible web resource. I'm not talking about going to the library and pulling out books. That's really not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about the quick Google search. If you're listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, I would probably Google Ludwig van Beethoven, learn a little bit about him, and Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, learn a little bit about that before you do the listening or the writing, and include a little bit of the reference of that light research into your lab report or thoughtful response. So you'll do a search. Wikipedia is perfectly fine. Search the composer's name or the title of the piece. And then your response could include articulate remarks about the details of the piece. For instance, what instruments are used, if it's in major or minor key, the tempo, the rhythm, the melody, etc. These are all vocabulary terms. If there's any potential purpose of the music, and then your impressions of the music. I also love it when students include fun facts about the composer or the work and notes about the performance of the work. Any of these things are great for a thoughtful response, and they show me that, number one, you've done a little bit of research, and number two, that you've listened to the work thoughtfully. That's my interest in this. And so by doing that, you've really been thoughtful about the way that you're listening. You're expected to be articulate and detailed with any written remarks. I do want remarks to be in full sentences and in paragraph form. I prefer not to receive outlines or bullets. There will be times during the course of the class that I do say, watch a video and take notes on the video and turn in an outline, and that's perfectly fine, or turn in bullets. And I'm happy to have you do that. But for the thoughtful responses or the lab reports, I really want you to use full sentences. Your responses will be evaluated based on the following comprehension criteria. Now, this ought to look a little familiar to you because it's directly from the writing program and the American Studies program. If you give me just the description only, I would say that's probably below expectations. And, how long the work is or what instruments are being used, and it's just data. I like getting that, but that's not quite enough. If you add some kind of a narration or inclusion of light research, now we're getting to where I want you to be. Maybe a lot of times students will say this song reminds me of a story, and here's the story, and I accept that. Or a lot of times students will say, in doing a quick internet search, I learned this about the composer, I learned this about the piece. I love getting that. And you can also include some of that light research from the textbook. I would always start every listening from the textbook where there's typically an entry. Comparison. I love it when, as we start building and adding composers to that which you know about, you can make comparisons. For instance, if we're learning about Mozart and you're writing about Mozart and you want to compare Mozart to Haydn, who is a contemporary of Mozart, that is fantastic. Or if you're learning about Mozart and you want to compare him to Bach, who was earlier, that's a great idea as well. So I would encourage you to do comparisons. Now we're really into the vein of what I'm looking for in these thoughtful responses. If you want to make a persuasion as part of it, I'm happy to have you do that. That's really doing it then. And then finally, if you want to really go abstract and give me something that I never expected, I'm happy to get that as well. In the end, I want you to make it clear in your written lab reports or thoughtful responses, we'll sort of call them both this term. I want it to be clear that you, number one, listen to the piece. I want it to be clear that you did some reading or research on the composer and piece, and at the minimum, that would be the textbook and a quick Wikipedia entry. Third, I want it to be clear that you can contextualize your listening and research, that you brought the two together. And fourth, and finally, that you approached it thoughtfully and that you were articulate in your writing. And if you can do those for me, you'll do great on the written responses. And I want to just one more time say that the way that this is most effective is if you do a little bit each day, and you won't get behind in the listening and responses. A little bit about late work. Due dates for written assignments in the course are soft deadlines. What does that mean? Well, I'm a little different than some teachers here in that, first of all, I understand that history of Western music is an elective, and so I want you to meet all of my assignment deadlines and due dates. However, if it's a Thursday night and you've got one of my assignments due on Friday, and you've also got a biology test and a physics test on Friday, and you have work to do on my assignment, and if you do my assignment, you're going to be up till 3 in the morning, I would prefer you wait, do well on your biology and physics test on Friday, and then do my assignment over the weekend, where you can do it thoughtfully and without losing sleep, and then turn it in on Monday. Okay? So the due dates for written assignments are soft deadlines. I typically will not take off credit for an assignment that's turned in a day late, 2 days late, or even, believe it or not, a week late. Okay? I understand that it's an elective course and you guys are academically busy, and sometimes it just doesn't line up the right way. Okay. If your work will be turned in after the assigned date, just ask permission from me. Just say, hey, Mr. Laird, can I turn that in on Monday? And I will always say yes. Okay. Now, here's the other side of it. All of our in-class discussion and concepts build on the assignment for the week. So it's really important that you do the listening at the time that we're having our conversation, or you will not be articulate. So it's imperative you keep up with the written assignments from week to week. If you get 2 weeks behind or 3 weeks behind on the written assignments, you will not know what's going on in class. So students that turn in more than 3 assignments just prior to midterm or at the end of a grading period will be assessed a penalty of 10% per week that the assignments are late. What am I really saying? Don't abuse my generosity. I'll be very generous with late assignments, but when they start stacking up, then I have to create some kind of a penalty. So I will assess a penalty if you wait till the day before midterm assignments are due and you turn in all of the listening assignments prior to midterm. Or if you wait till just right before the end of the grading period and turn everything in. Because there's no way you can be as thoughtful about that work doing it. Keep up with it every single day. Academic honesty, same policy with academic honesty as every other class. Tests and quizzes are to be completed with no help from others or assistance given to others. And by the way, the tests that I give are really on the facts and the information on the composers. So if you keep up with that information from class to class, you will be in good shape for the tests. And every test has a little bit of a listening portion as well, where I ask you to listen to an example of a listening, and then you have some vocabulary term that is associated with that listening, and it's a multiple choice. I'll give you like 2 choices, and you listen to the piece. For instance, let's say we were listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and it was ba 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 ba, the very famous theme, and the choices would be Beethoven or Brahms. I would want you to know that it's Beethoven, and I only do that with the real famous stuff, but there are other things as well. So we'll talk about that as we go. But otherwise, the tests are, I think, very reasonable, and they fit right in underneath our class discussions. But any time we have a test, that's the major thing with academic honesty. And I would also say on the thoughtful responses, I want you to give your ideas. That being said, I would have no problem if you decided to listen to music in groups and even talk about it in groups. I just wouldn't want you to turn in the same written responses. So I'm okay with that. Okay? So that's our academic honesty. And just while I say it, this might be a good time to pause the video, and you could go over to the History of Western Music page that you see right here. Drop this little arrow down, and you will see an academic honesty link right here. I'd like you to click on that, and that will take you to my academic honesty form. This is the school's academic honesty statement, and I'd like you to simply click on Western music history and any other music classes that you happen to be in. Pop your name in there. Click that you have read and understand the academic honesty options and policies, and name in there and hit submit, and I will then have you in for your academic honesty statement at the beginning of the term. And as you know, that's a school policy, so I appreciate you doing that. We'll go ahead and leave that. So that's academic honesty. After that, we have basically our syllabus. I have it broken down by weeks. This year will be just a little different, but not significantly. I will have assignments for Thursday and Friday of this week. Week 1 is typically music vocabulary and background information, our first listening lab, and a vocabulary quiz. We're going to probably hold off on the vocabulary quiz until next week. Please plan to have a vocabulary quiz on the Monday that I return. It'll be very short, it'll be multiple choice, and we'll get you taken care of. Week 2, then we dive right into the Baroque era. Week 3, more Baroque. Week 4, more Baroque. We'll get through all of our Baroque composers by the 4th week of the class. Weeks 5, 6, and 7 are the Viennese era with specific composers guiding us through them. And then weeks 8 through 10 are the Romantic era. And by the time we finish up at the end of the term, you will have a real broad understanding of sort of the 3 great eras in Western classical music. So that'll get us taken care of there. I would like to take a minute to move over to my Google Classroom page. Again, there's some resources right here on this drop down. This is sort of the About section. I already mentioned the academic honesty statement. Our course expectations that I've just reviewed are linked right here at the top. This is something that might surprise you. All of our notes in the class are available to you right here under Official Notes by Era. The reason I do this is I want you to be able to come to class and listen and think and talk, converse. So some of you will be taking notes in every single class, and that's perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. But I want to make it clear that for every class and every lecture, the notes that I'm drawing my comments from are available to you. So, for instance, when I get going on the Baroque era next week, those notes are right here, and I'll be making remarks from these notes. And also, I will frequently be pulling up links on YouTube of stuff that sort of shows the ideas that we're talking about, and you'll be able to go right back to those links if you're studying for a test. So nothing's secret or private here. All of the concepts that I go over in class are right here in my notes, and so as a result, these can be your notes as well. Now, am I saying or suggesting that you never need to take notes? That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But this is a resource for you, and especially when I go to links or different places on the web, I think you'll find this to be a really great resource. So some of my introductory remarks are here, and then you'll see specific composers in bold and the things that those composers are noted for. And one of the things that you're going to note in the tests is that we'll try to highlight not a ton of composers from every era, but a specific few, and then we'll want you to know some information about those specific composers. We call that what falls under the umbrella of that composer. So for instance, for this guy, Gabrielli, I want you to know that he's Italian. I want you to know that he's noted for sacred vocal and instrumental music, that he writes for brass and some other stuff. We'll talk about all of this stuff, but those concepts under his name are what he's known for. Monteverdi, Purcell, and you can look as you go down through here, you'll see other information. But a lot of our class, or really all of our class discussion, will be based on the notes that I provide for you. And again, those notes are all available to you right here by era. So I hope that you'll use that as a resource. Again, I'm not trying to trip anyone up here. I want you to really understand the stuff that we're talking about. Okay? Then over here, the assignments folder has every listening lab, every thoughtful response, we'll use those two terms interchangeably, available to you. So when we have our first week of listening assignments, they are right here under week 1. So you can always get to these assignments very, very easily. Let me see if I can click on this and get it. So here is our week 1 music history listening assignments. And these particular thoughtful responses, this is the first set of thoughtful responses for this week. So you can start on these as early as you want to. But here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to listen to each of these linked works and write a thoughtful response, or I would even write or listening lab report for the music. And I'd be really curious when I get back to school if one of these ideas resonates with you better than another, a thoughtful response or a listening lab report. Basically, I'm looking for the same information, maybe just put together a little differently. We'll talk about that in a minute. Begin by doing some light research on the composer and piece. Include a little bit of background and your impression of the piece based on your research. Be sure to include as many of the vocabulary terms from the reading as possible. And your reading for this week is chapters 1 and 2 of Vocabulary Music, pages 1 through 65. Okay? You'll be able to click on the links and listen to the piece. And you'll notice also that I've included the length of each piece here. So as I look at this, we have 1 minute, 8 minutes, so there's 10. Another 5 is 15, another 5 is 20, and another 10 is 30. So there's about 30 minutes worth of listening. So I would expect that this homework assignment for the first week with me away is about 1 hour of homework for week 1, starting today. Okay? And this is your opportunity to do your first thoughtful response. I'll close that up. You'll notice that here we have each week represented, and I will assign these as we go, and you'll really get a feel for what we're doing. Okay? I'll clean that up too as we go. But week 1 should be absolutely accurate. Okay? Good. So that's your assignments folder, and you do have an assignment for this week. And we will also have a video to watch in lieu of class, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. And then finally, I do have a class website that you can click on. This is not a resource that I've used a ton in recent years, so I don't even think that you'll need to check this out a whole lot this term. So the Google Class site is really the important stuff for me right now. Has everyone done your academic honesty statement? If you haven't, pause the video and do that right now. Okay. Now, you're also going to notice that I have here posted Thursday in lieu of class, The Story of Music, The Age of Discovery. Now, this is I have to change the due date on this. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now because this is for our class right now. Somehow I got 2017 in there because I just moved the assignment from another year. Sorry about that. So this video is for this Thursday, the 7th. So I'll make the due date the 8th. This is sort of a background on music history of everything up to the Baroque era of where we're going to start. So consider this to be background information, and this video is in lieu of class on Thursday. Now, what I'd like you to do with this video is to simply take notes in bullets form on this video, hit the highlights, and it's really to show me that you've watched the video. So watch the video, throw a couple of notes down. I would say that it should be 1 page of bullets to 2, not more than that. I don't want minutia, I want big ideas. And this is my way that I will be able to give your attendance information for Thursday, and also that I know that you watched the video. So this will be your assignment for Thursday in class. Okay? Great. I will also have a Friday assignment as well, although I don't have that ready for you just yet. We'll have that later in the week for sure. So I think that should be a pretty good introduction to history of Western music. I hope that you have a good feel for what we're doing. It's all about listening to music, learning about the composers and the values of those composers, so that when you listen to a piece of music, that you don't just go, oh, I like this or I don't like it. What I want you to be able to say is, I understand the values of this composer, I understand a little bit of the values of the era of this composer, and now I understand what they were trying to do in context of what's happening. And again, I would remind you that our goal is, when you're in college, if you go to a concert and you see that they're playing something by Bach, that you go, I know a little bit about this and I understand the values of that composer in that era. If you're able to do that after the class, we've been fully successful. I want to remind you that I'm available through email this week, so if there's anything here that doesn't make sense to you, please feel free to email me and I'll be more than happy to touch base with you. And we should be good to go. We'll hit the ground running on the Baroque era when I get back on Monday. And I would remind you again, there will be a vocabulary quiz on the reading on Monday. Okay? Thanks, guys. I hope this all makes sense. And if there's any questions, give me a quick email, and I look forward to seeing you next week.